This is 21 Guide. Hopefully the sound is better for you guys, so we don't have any crybabies. Characters, what they say, you better do your reading. If I were you, I'd go back over some of those stories and make sure that you remember what was going on in those stories. Here are the stories. We have the intro. Those are those intro sentences. You have the Fons Sacer, Lucius Marcius Memor, Senator ad Venit, Memor rem suspecit. Intro sentences, that is where the architect comes in. He's looking at everybody that's working. He says, hey, good job. The one guy who's trying to build a little wall around the bath, he gets mad at some other guy and throws him in the fountain. Fons Sacer, that is the section where the king is wanting to know whether or not he should go. My favorite part of that one, of course, what should I do? He says, don't go to the fountain, go make a wheel. Lucius Marcius Memor, that's at the fountains. That is where Cephalus is trying to wake Memor up because he's drunk. And he says, leave me alone, send everybody away, I don't want to mess with them. Senator ad Venit is whenever Saulius is approaching, and Memor is all freaking out. What do I do? Oh my gosh, I'm going to have a chance to make friends with a powerful dude. Memor rem suspecit is where Memor has to undertake the plan, whatever plan it may be. Saulius tells him, hey, I want you to kill the king. He's talking to his freedman, Cephalus, and says, what am I going to do? Cephalus is like, hey man, no problem. I got this cup, it's got poison in it. I've been thinking about using it on you for years. Okay, so make sure that you remember what's going on with the stories, the characters as well. Identifying the present active participle and identifying the perfect passive participle. Here in the blue, the top part of the blue, I gave you duco, ducere, duxi, and ductus. Those are the principal parts of the verb duco, which is to lead. If you notice I have arrows. I have a red arrow and a green arrow. The red arrow comes from the present stem ducere. That's going to create a present active participle. If I look at ductus over here, that's the green arrow. That's a perfect passive participle. I've also used blue to show you what stem, where the stem is in the word. If you look at ducens, the D-U-C is in blue. That comes from taking off the E-R-E from ducere. The blue is the stem of that word. The E-N-S, the green part, is what I've added to the stem to create the present active participle. Ducentus is the same thing. You see the duke is in the blue, the entus is in green, so the present active participle comes from entus, the present comes from the DUC. If you look to the perfect passive, it's all blue, which means it doesn't change at all. It just is what it is. Fourth principal part, I have no green there. There's nothing that helps me identify it like the NT does in the present active participle. Okay, make sure that we know how to translate these as well. The present active is going to be translated as ing. So that ENS and that ENTIS represents the ing in leading. Literal translation of ducens is leading. Literal translation of ducentus is of leading. Perfect passive participle, literal translation is having been led or led, one of those two. The other part of participle translation, you have the literal versus the natural. The literal is what we just talked about. The present equals the ing form of the verb. The perfect equals the having been plus the ed or just the ed form. We have also what's called the natural translation or a more natural translation. If we do this, the present participle, present active participle translates at the same time as the main verb. Let me show you what I'm talking about. In these two examples, I have two similar sentences, puella amans ambulabat, and then puella puerum amans ambulabat. In the first one, I translate amans as literal. The loving girl was walking. Notice that it's red, just like the literal in the previous one was red, because I love colors. In the second sentence, I have a similar sentence. I've added puerum because typically this is what happens. You'll get a clause. So here, puerum amans is a clause. It's not just a single word like amans, puella. It has a clause that goes with it. When this happens, I can translate this as the girl loving the boy was walking. I can translate it that way. Literal is just fine. When I get these clauses, I like to talk about what's natural. And in this case, the girl who was loving the boy was walking. Here's what I do. First, I want to identify the tense of the main verb. In this case, it's the imperfect tense. So when I identify that, next thing I want to do is ask myself, what kind of participle do I have? Amans is a present participle, so I translate it as the same time. The same time as ambulabat is the imperfect. That's why I use was loving. The girl who was loving at the same time as the main verb. The boy was walking. That sounded really weird. The girl who was loving the boy was walking. So the was loving comes from the BA, because amans is the present tense. I need it to be the same time. It's another way of translating those participles. Okay, so magically I changed all the sentences to include amata instead of amans. Now I've identified that amata is my participle now. I can translate it as literal. The love girl was walking. Or I can translate it as quite literally as the girl having been loved was walking. That's the literal translation. There's nothing wrong with that. In the next one, I could also say the girl having been loved by the boy was walking. And there's nothing wrong with that literal translation. When I get a clause like this, again, I want to try to make it more natural if I can. The girl who had been loved by the boy was walking. Perfect participles happen before the main verb. Again, the BA, I've identified ambulabat as an imperfect. A perfect tense is my participle, happens before the imperfect. I chose the pluperfect because that happens before the imperfect. Distinguishing between the present and perfect participles is not too difficult. I'm going to give you a shortcut. It's not really the best way to do it because later on it will get a little bit tougher. I'm going to go back to this Duco-Ducara scene. If you notice the highlighted letters NS and NT, they're in ductus, no NS, no NT. Present has a big old fat NT at the end of it. So those are some of the things that will help me identify present participles, that NT. I realize that you've already done this, but go through there again and see if you can identify the present participles. Hopefully you were able to see the highlighted yellow NTs. All of those are present participles and translated as ing or the same time as the main verb. The rest of them, if they don't have the ns or the nt, probably going to be perfect participles. Some of you crazy blonde people out there are yelling, wait, number 7 is also one. Yes, it is. I just missed it. Again, in order for a perfect passive participle, for it to be a perfect in order for it to be a present active participle, it has to have nt in it. Absolutely has to have nt in it. There are some perfect passive participles that have nt in them, but are not necessarily present active participle. And what do I do with that? I just have to remember which ones they are. For example, in this one, number 8, there is an N and a T in there, but they are separated by the letter I, so hopefully, unless you're having problems that day focusing, you won't identify that NT as present. There are some others, like tenses, which may have that NT in it, but it's definitely a perfect passive participle. How do I know that? Because I've memorized it. Next is noun and adjective agreement. That's determining whether or not something is the same case, number, and gender of the noun that it's modifying. Hopefully we can do that. Been doing it since like week 3. However, just in case, I've left you black words on the left that are nouns and red words on the right that are adjectives. Looking at these, you should be able to tell that they match. Cephalus is nominative, it is singular, it is masculine, so is ebrius. Memory is dative, singular, and masculine, so is lito. Pueris is ablative or dative, plural, and masculine, so is facilibus. They have to agree in case, number, and gender, also known as COG, case, number, gender. Okay, verb, tense, and person identification. So what tense is the verb, and is it first, second, or third person, singular or plural? That shouldn't be too big of an issue. Just remember your personal pronouns ego, tu, and nos and los. That should help you identify a person. Remember our verb tense. That's that big chart that we had, marker or no. Clue or no, hopefully you still have that around. Might want to look at that. It will help you a little bit. Case usage. Within a sentence, knowing what case to use. This is especially important whenever I'm using a word like sacrificio, which is plural and neuter. And so I have the word sacerdotes as well, which could be either accusative or nominative in plural. Sacrificio can be accusative or nominative in plural. Because of that, I have to use the context of the sentence to decide whether or not the priest should be making the sacrifices or the sacrifices should be making the priest. Hopefully you can figure out which one should be happening. For both these, sacerdotes, the ES in the third declension can either be nominative plural or accusative plural. And of course, sacrificio, because of our neuter rule, neuter plurals end in A, the nominative and the accusative end in A. Sacerdote, dos down here is the singular form of sacerdotes. Just wanted you to see that it was third declension, that's why it's down there. But you are going to get these neuter forms being used with the regular forms, and you may have to decide whether or not, by context, whether or not sacerdotes should be used as the subject or whether sacrificio should be used as the subject. Dative with a special verb. Several verbs that we use the dative. We have those special constructions. We have special constructions like necesse est that uses the dative tibi, so it is necessary for you to go. You have words like propinquo that take the dative. I approach you. Credo also takes the dative. I believe in you. Folio also takes the dative. So I favor you. We also obey in the dative. I obey you. So all of those use dative. We have several of those. Make sure that you're aware of them. Identifying a verb within a quotation. That's kind of tricky, so let's talk about it. So once I determine that something is being said, so the cook says something, I have to ask myself what's being said inside the quotation. If the cook is talking about himself inside of the quotations, then the verb would be in the second person. I'm sorry, first person is what I meant. In this case, you're going to be tempted to choose paroit because you see master, he prepared dinner, but the cook is the one saying it, so I bet that the cook is excited that parawi, I prepared dinner. So looking at who said the quotation and what's being said within the quotation may change the person that you think it is. In this case, if you're not slowing down and you're not paying attention to what's in the quotations, you may have chosen parawit instead of the parawi. If I change this to Amelia and she's the one saying this sentence, master, dinner, somebody prepared dinner, Amelia said. If Amelia is not the cook, I might choose that third person singular. Master, he prepared the dinner, Amelia said. If Amelia was the cook, I would use parawi. So knowing who's saying what and what's being said inside that quotation very well could change the person that you use within that quotation.
Okay, here we go. Where were the statues of the gods kept in the temple? They kept them in the cellar. That is not where you keep the wine. That was a special place inside of the temple called the kela, not the cellar, where you keep your fruits and vegetables. What material was used to pipe in the baths at Aqua Azulis? That would be lead. L-E-D, lead. That'd be PB on your periodical table.
We apologize for the inconvenience. The proper spelling of lead is L-E-A-D. Now back to your programming.
Why did the visitors make offerings at the baths? Because they wanted to feel better.
Okay, that was my brother. Thank you, bro. Why was Memor stationed at Aqua Azulis? Well, his biggest job while he was in Aqua Azulis was to make sure that the Roman customs got spread about the natives. Okay, what were the symbols for the Roman Minerva? That would be the owl and a helmet and a bunch of dead guys. What were the sick people called? They were agrodi. Next we have, who was in charge of the religious rites? We know, of course, that in this case it was the Herastrix. Within the story, what were the name of the workers? If you remember, it was the Faubri, the craftsmen. Where were the baths located? What town? Well, in ancient Rome, it was called Aquasilis, and in present day, we call it Bath.
Maybe that's a place in which the king of the Regnics lived. That was the Fishborn Palace. Who is the Celtic god of spring? I don't know. I'm pretty sure that it was very localized. They worshipped different gods depending on what they grew. It didn't matter. If they grew some grain, they had one grain dude. If there was a tree, there was a tree people. I don't know, it's crazy. How much water flowed before the stream in Aquasilis per day? 250,000 gallons. You want to know how crazy I am? Well, I'm going to go all the way back up to the Celtic god of spring. I said I didn't know. I do. It's so sad. This is the one I don't know. The god of healing. They worship different gods sometimes, and it was very localized. Okay, why do the Romans encourage the use of Roman and Celtic gods? Because they're sneaky. They want you to think that they're letting you be a part of their culture, and really they're trying to rip yours out from underneath. Okay, to give you an idea of what they would do to my religion, you took Solus, who is the god of spring, and you match him with Minerva, who's a girl. Solus, dude. Minerva, girl, whatever. Doesn't matter. We're the Romans, and we're going to combine the two. And then later on, we're going to switch her name to the first. We're going to call her Minerva Solus. And away goes your god, Romans take over. And of course, after all that looking and all that money spent, what do the scholars find in the baths? Coins and pottery. So basically, they could grind some chicken and put it in their pottery to eat it. That's it. All that money. Coins and pottery.
Okay, English words that are going to have to do with your word study. You have concealment has to do with hiding. Confidence is going to be trust. Extracted is to take away. Circumspect is to look around. Gravity is the weight or the seriousness of the situation or whatever. Expert is someone who has gained experience and have had success in a particular field. Susceptible means that it is subject to something. Justive has to do with commanding. Sapience has to do with wisdom. And dejected has to do with sadness. Okay, who was Cephalus? Cephalus was the freedman of Memor. He's the one that came up with the plan to kill Cogidubnus. He was also the guy who basically ran the baths. He has a poisoned cup. That's part of the plan for Cogidubnus, etc. Cogidubnus was the king. And Quintus is staying with him, visiting with him all the time. He asks Quintus for help. Then he's going to show up and somebody's going to try to kill him. Memor is the Haruspex of the baths. He's in charge of basically everything around the baths, except for he's always too drunk and he relies on Cephalus to do it. He seems like a pretty good guy. Not. He's the one who Saulius asked to kill the king, and then Memor goes to Cephalus, and Cephalus comes up with the plan. Quintus is visiting Cogidubnus. He asks, Cogidubnus says, hey, should I go to the baths? Quintus says, how far away are they? Quintus, whenever Cogidubnus asks Saulius, Saulius says, I don't think you should go to the baths. I think you should go to your lawyer and make a will because you're dead. Not very nice thing to say to an old guy. Quintus is visiting Saulius as well. Don't forget that. He's staying with Saulius. We'll find out later that that's kind of ironic. And then we have Saulius. He's our bad guy, right? Saulius, of course, is the senator who came from Rome into Britain. He's kind of helping manage things. I would assume that he is an associate of Agricola who has gone to the north to fight the Scots.